from taxi drivers to hotel workers, hoteliers, people who sell food, goods and services. Grenada has an attraction based on its environment, including and particularly its marine environment. And if this were to be damaged to the point where people decided, look, Grenada is too dirty, we don't want to come back there, it's going to affect not only the people who own the hotels, but numbers of other people. You know, so that's one example. Of course, there's a recreation for the average person in Grenada who relies on the beaches and the marine environment for their recreation. They're the people who do fishing, there's the water sports, there's all kinds.
It will affect our food source because
it can affect your food source, your health. Exactly. I mean, the types of pollutants that we've been talking about, not only sewage, but the industrial waste, the chemicals, pesticides, all of these can accumulate. They can affect us directly and also indirectly. They can accumulate in the food chain, the consumption of shellfish, for example, where these things can tend to bioaccumulate, can have severe impacts on our health in the longer term. So there are many things that we need to, as individuals, be aware of in terms of reducing pollution of our marine environment.
Okay, you said 6 have already signed on, 3 more need to do so. I will say Grenada will be on board shortly, so that's a positive note. Where do you think, or where do you hope to see the LBS protocol, let's say in the next 5 years? Do you think by then you'd have all 9 on, that it will be a law and that everyone internationally would have to adhere to it? Do you foresee that? Do you think that's a practical hope?
I think both of us rely on that for our jobs, that will determine whether we're doing our jobs properly. We have deliverables, so we're hoping Grenada. I think we're working on Barbados realistically, Antigua and Barbuda as well. Those are the 3 that come to mind immediately that have already expressed an interest at a relatively high level in terms of ministerial level. So those at the very least, and it's not just 9 that I think we have targeted. 9 to minimum. Yeah, but we'd love to have all of the wider Caribbean countries sign on. And some of the things that we've been talking about today relate to the benefits of the ratification of this protocol. And in fact, there are potentially quite a bit of resources available, technical and financial, for the countries that actually commit to this protocol. From the projects such as the one that I'm responsible for, from UNEP in general, and through a number of donor agencies and governments that want to see this happen. In fact, the United States, for example, has been very keen over the years to support the countries that are interested in protecting the wider Caribbean Sea, because they border the same body of water. And it's all, and the French, we mentioned the French, and they have territories in our region, so they're all very interested, and they have a bit more money, at least they used to. We don't know if they do anymore, but they're in so much deficit right now, but they have the ability to support some of the work that we need to do in the islands. And by signing the protocol, that is one of the benefits that can be derived.
Okay. How would you measure how well, again, once it's in effect for everyone, how do you measure how well it's being adhered to, or how would that be done?
Well, this is critical, because we could always say, like, the formal ratification is the easy part.
Right.
Yes, a lawyer somewhere signs and says the government of Grenada has now signed, wonderful. Right. But it's really in terms of the implementation and sometimes the monitoring constantly, because too often persons ask, well, has the environment, even we could ask, has the environment in Grenada improved in the last 10 years or not? Are the beaches more or less polluted? And those are fundamental questions that would help measure how effective the protocol is. So we really now need to do an assessment of where are we in terms of pollution, in terms of Grenada's beach, in terms of our potable water, in terms of practices in the watersheds. And then once we establish that sort of baseline, then we monitor and we evaluate. Are the policies effective? Is enforcement effective. We heard a lot of discussion today about enforcement, or maybe not so good enforcement, but we realized that it has to be monitored, and this is where the national agencies have to come in. So it's not for UNEP or for the project to come and do that for Grenada. It's about the agencies that now have the exactly.
Which is why we need a higher level commitment, because you know whereas they can get something out of it, they also have to contribute something to it. Yeah, in most cases.
I know they usually say not to end on a bad note, but maybe just for the extra punch to bring the point home. If this is not done, if Grenada does not see the importance and the need to get on board with the LBS Protocol, worst case scenario, what could happen?
I want to take a quote a bit from a workshop that we just held to discuss just these issues in Cuba, and the opening remarks said, the LBS Protocol is about life in these islands. We are too dependent on the environment, the marine environment, the terrestrial environment for our development. I mean, if you speak to anyone, something in their life is touched by the marine environment in one way or another, and therefore without the protocol, which is looking at an issue which we can control, and I think that's another point that has to be emphasized. We hear a lot about climate change. Climate change is a big issue, but if you ask individuals what can you do about climate change, it's limited. We can do a lot about controlling pollution, and I think we need to take that step.
So what would you say is next for Grenada?
Well, during the meeting which we had while we were here, many of the agencies said we need an action plan, we need a roadmap. Now we need to decide what we have to do. One of the ways that UNEP has supported is material like this, brochures, CDs, DVDs, which we provided to the local agencies, which would help in their awareness process with the schools, with the general public, with the communities, with the NGOs.
What are some of the local agencies that attended?
We had persons from the Department of Agriculture. We had persons from physical planning. We had some NGO representation as well. We had someone from St. George's University. So we had a cross-section of academic persons, as well as the NGOs, as well as the government agencies, as it deals with
water, correct? Makes sense.
Solid waste management was there as well. So that's one aspect, getting the information out. But what we've realized, not only here in Grenada, but in many of the other countries, is that yes, this is still good, you know, promotional material is good, but we have problems that we need to solve now.
Correct.
We have to make interventions. We know where some of the pollution hotspots are and what we need to do to deal with them. And this is where the IWCAM project is proposing to coming to provide some direct assistance to Grenada in addressing one of those issues.
Okay. No, thanks, Chris, for the introduction to this particular project, because what we've been trying to do in all of the islands is to support the countries themselves in integrating management of the various issues. And through the project, which is integrating watershed and coastal area management, essentially what we are reminding the countries, because a lot of them know it already, is that what happens on land typically will eventually impact on the coast. And in our small islands, if you pollute upstream, it can then impact on your coastline. And that's the whole philosophy behind the project. So what we've done is, in a number of the countries, we have small scale, what we call demonstration projects, to look at different issues and approaches. In one island, we're looking at groundwater protection, and a couple of them, in fact. Others we're looking at sewage disposal. Others we're looking at management of activities such as pig farming and other activities which are polluting water supplies. We're also supporting, for example, rainwater harvesting as a water supply augmentation approach. And in the case of Grenada, we want to do something which will be meaningful in Grenada, and which will also go beyond just talking about the protocol, but more demonstrate
putting it into action.
Yes, exactly, putting it into action. So that's essentially what we've been discussing with the government and the agencies, is what would be most meaningful to them. And so far we've been able to identify a key watershed in in Grenada, which is considered to be at risk because of a number of the activities, the pollution and other sources of other activities which in fact eventually end up in the river and then end up in the sea. And what we're going to be trying to do is to come up with some kind of a watershed management plan and then try